Resuming our work on SB 11. We have council back with us. We want to pick back up on our walkthrough of the bill. We have a lot of questions since we work, and so we've gone a little slower than originally thought, but that's okay. And we have more time scheduled tomorrow, so. We're also gonna have to pause in the middle of this morning for the Sergeant Arms and the new chief to come in, but that should be true.
Where are we going?
No,
You're coming here.
it's-
We're coming here.
It's a house call, just like.
Oh, yeah.
It's doctor.
Really?
Okay, good morning, Mr. Kowski, thanks for coming back.
Oh.
Now that you survived the amendment wars. Good to see you. So,
I don't think I see also legislative council. Do you know where we left off? I have written down page 12, but I want to confirm because it has been a while.
I have, I believe. The mark. Wait. Pardon
Yes, I do think it is page 12. As I'm starting to remember,
me.
but it was so long ago. So you will recall that this is the segment of the bill on municipal zoning. There's quite a few sections on municipal zoning. You do have your little outlines too, if you need it. So I was talking about, I think last time. 4412, which is a big section with a lot of information in it. But I think we finished talking about it. Now we're on to 4413.
That also comes in.
Alright,
All right.
same here, my last mark at the bottom. I'm seeing page.
Great. So page 12 is section 11. This is amending 4413. So 4413 sets up a list of types of uses that municipalities can only have a limited set of regulation over. So generally, you will recall municipalities have broad authority in their zoning provisions, but there's this list in 4413 of things that they have limited ability to regulate through zoning. And last year you added to this list emergency shelters. And this is proposing to add a new category of hotels and motels converted to permanently affordable housing developments. So it is adding these types of properties to this list, and the only aspects that they can regulate are the location, size, height, building bulk, yards, ports, setbacks, density of buildings, on-street parking, loading facilities, traffic, noise, lighting, landscaping, and screening. So it's adding hotels and motels converted to permanently affordable housing developments.
Chairman McDonald?
Motel is a. I know what a ranch is, and a cape is, and a mobile home is. The motel is a business fund. Is it not?
It's kind of architecture too, isn't
So it is a use, it is a land use. Yes, it is a type of business.
They're usually already there for purposes of this discussion. No one's dropping motels in that need to be told if they were to drop them or to put them. Hence, maybe, that's.
So, do we need to define motel or hotel somewhere in statute?
Well. If there is not a definition of something in statute, the plain ordinary meaning of it applies. So if there's concern, if there's confusion, you can add a definition. I don't know off the top of my head if there's a definition of motel. I do know there is a definition of hotel. I believe in Title IX in the business regulation chapter. And potentially in the tax chapter. So you could add one. This is, I do think there is a little bit of awkwardness here because you are talking about already existing buildings. That are being converted into housing. And it is directing basically the municipalities not to, they are given limited ability to zone. For these things. So they have to allow them and they have some limited ability to impose zoning regulations on them.
Could you, so is it last year, in 100 that we said? This is, the conversion that you, municipality must allow. But was it regardless of, how that area is zoned? I suppose it'd be zoned commercial or with residential commercial or something that included commercial, but already was a hotel.
So no, this is new on line 20. Last year you added emergency shelters.
So that's right, okay.
Yes. So yes, I do think there is some awkwardness here that you're talking about a conversion of a building, but. I think the intent is to make sure the municipality allows for this type of conversion to happen in their zoning.
Yeah, I can imagine town being more concerned about something going the other way. Homes became a hotel, which would be commercial in a potentially residential neighborhood at first, we can imagine some. You're a former mayor, I don't know how a commercial use being converted to housing would run afoul of zones, but I don't, that's not my bailiwick. I'm just trying to think of an example. Can you imagine like why that would run afoul of zoning?
Yes, I mean, I think there are actually many different ways that it could, specifically density.
Ah.
Right, so
I see.
I think what is envisioned here, and I do not have practical knowledge of this, is a hotel or a motel. Can be somewhat easily converted into housing because there's already rough layouts of living quarters.
Yeah.
But a 50-unit hotel space converted to 50 units of housing would blow the density requirements in towns.
Right.
So that's one thing. And then I do think there are. I can speculate on some other types of zoning measures that towns would have, but I don't have a ton of practical knowledge of this space.
Well, that's really helpful. I was just, because I'm trying to figure out how could you run into a problem with that, so, thank you.
I feel okay though.
Okay, so next. On page 13 is section 12. This is on parking bylaws. So currently in statute, there is only one real sort of small section on parking bylaws in 44. 14. This is adding some other parking issues for municipalities. So on line 4, parking regulation, consistent with 4414, where there's already some language. And with this section, municipality may regulate parking. Tandem parking shall count towards residential parking space requirements. A municipality may require that tandem spaces are not shared between different dwelling units. As used in this subsection, tandem parking means a narrow parking space that can accommodate 2 or more vehicles parked in a single file line. Parking space size standards for the purpose of residential parking, a municipality shall define a standard parking space as not larger than 9 feet by 18 feet. However, a municipality may allow a portion of parking spaces to be smaller for compact cars or similar use. A municipality may require a larger space wherever American with Disabilities Act compliant spaces are required. existing non-conforming parking, a municipality shall allow an existing non-conforming parking space to count towards the parking requirement of an existing residential building. If new residential units are added to the building.
You happen to know that, you know, this. Parking spaces, how big they are, is there like an ANSI standard for this, and this is. Is it exactly that, or
No.
or this is
This,
something made up? It's
Yeah.
new?
so, no, I think maybe you should hear from an actual expert on this. Senate Economic Development originally was actually considering 8x16. And her concern that I think. Is it the F350? 150 is too large for that, so. I don't know if there's an attempt here to standardize, there was some pushback against that. So, and there's one more provision on this, so just to remind you, currently, the authority for municipalities over parking is very broad. This is attempting to put some more detail around it. Currently, the only other provision in the zoning related to this is the parking space requirement that was added in the Home Act about towns not requiring more than 1.5 parking spaces. So yeah, this is adding some additional detail. On page 14, there's another provision. So adjacent lots, a municipality may allow a person with a valid legal agreement for use of parking spaces in an adjacent or nearby lot to count toward the parking requirement of a residential building. So it is fairly common for towns to have a required number of parking spaces for a use, whether it's commercial or residential. And so this is allowing them to have people use agreements with adjacent or nearby lots to count as their parking spaces.
Basically, they secured. A legal agreement, so that contracting to have parking spots, like a neighboring parking lot. And they extend to council. And I had a quick question on line 16 to 18 prior page, sorry, go backwards. A municipality shall allow an existing non-conforming parking space. What's a non-conforming parking space? Like, could I declare that parking on my front lawn is a non-conforming parking space? Because I parked there for 6 months. It's a lawn, or was, but now it's a car in the lawn.
I don't think that's a great example because you are talking about we're primarily talking about a developer, because this is about when new residential units are added. So I think this primarily has to do with size. But I don't know.
Well, for instance, what if I had an ADU, right? Would that be a new residential unit? Yes. Right, and if I had a 19th century driveway that accommodated like 1 or 2 cars, and now I have an ADU, and then some says, oh, well. Parking the lawn, which I've seen. And I'm just wondering if that parking in the lawn thing, the non-conforming parking space that must be allowed for.
I don't know.
Okay. Well, maybe I'll have to count that, right? Thank you.
So on page 14, still on parking, this is the language from last year's Home Act on parking spaces. So section 13 is amending 4414. So last year you added the language. Starting on line 11, in any district that is served by municipal sewer and water infrastructure that allows residential uses. A municipality shall not require more than one parking space per dwelling unit. However, a municipality may require 1.5 parking spaces for duplexes and multi-unit dwellings in areas not served by sewer and water. And in areas that are located more than 1/4 mile away from public parking. The number of parking spaces shall be rounded up to the nearest whole number when calculating the number of spaces. So it's adding, I guess it was unclear what was being rounded up. So yes, this is attempting to clarify. Round up.
Thank you, I guess I know this is what we passed, but like in looking at it again, wait, why did we do that? Because. A municipality may require 1.5 parking spaces for duplexes, multi-unit dwellings in areas not served by water and sewer, so that in my mind is like. You're further out in the country. And we're gonna require more, oh yeah, okay, never mind, just talk myself through that. Probably need a car. Okay, done.
Okay.
Except for that, sorry. I feel like you're more likely to have available parking. So it's less likely that you need to require it. And but I'm fine. Move on.
I mean, I think you might be speculating a little bit.
I think that's fair.
You can't necessarily know. Yeah.
Is it thinking here that roadside parking will be more available as you're getting out there?
No,
Does.
no, I think last year's intent was primarily around. Can you increase density on an individual lot? And an impediment to increasing the number of units on a lot is how many parking spaces are required. So if most of a lot is gonna be taken up by parking for those units. Potentially not be able to build as many units as you would like to see, so. And there's the thought that the market itself would take care of that if it's a property with a limited parking. People who require to have 3 or 4 parking spaces would potentially just seek. Housing in other places, but people who don't need as many parking spaces would be drawn to those units, so. Yeah. Parking is a bit it's a complicated issue with dimensions and people get very passionate about it.
Thank you.
So. Page 15, still on parking, section 14 is the effective date of the section I just read you. So last year, that in the Home Act, the parking requirement section about requiring only 1 parking space or 1.5 parking spaces. Is not set to take effect until December 1 of this year, and so this is moving the effective date up to July 1 of this year. Alright, section 15, lot coverage bylaws. A municipality shall allow for a lot coverage bonus of 10%. On lots that allow access to new or subdivided lots without road frontage. So towns have the ability to set lot coverage restrictions, how much a building can take up on a lot. This is giving an additional 10% bonus if that lot allows access to a parcel without road frontage.
So I'm just trying to imagine what's going on, if you created a lot, which do we not allow landlocked lots with no road frontage. You know, that. It seems like it's pretty rare you get a map that there's a lot that you actually can't get to a road from. So I'm not sure what this is allowing for. More development because you're allowing a road to pass through your lot, or? What is the, I'm
I
sorry,
think you
I'm
need to
following.
hear from someone else, because I. Don't, I think that is what is attempting to happen here, I don't know. I don't know where this idea came from, really, other than,
Sounds like a situation and someone said, oh, we could cure that. It's just. You're watching.
Well, I feel like I can speculate, but maybe I shouldn't.
It's fun.
It is
We,
fun.
we want you to speculate.
I mean, I guess I can imagine,
So what we could, yeah,
like, let's say you have a lot and you'd like to have your kid build a house on the same lot, so you subdivide it, but they're gonna share the same driveway. So the lot itself doesn't have street frontage, but you're sharing a driveway, let's say, and so it's infill.
Right.
Basically, and so as a result of like, hey, you're building infill, we want that, you're allowed to cover more of the lot. That's how I read it.
yeah, that sounds big. At least it makes it easier to figure out like why that, how,
Yeah.
why that could happen.
I can speculate as well, that there are people whose idea of optimum. View planning for this, planning is by definition of the future, that optimum planning. Involves creating urban environments. In which most people don't have cars at all. And you want to make the place a good, comfortable place for people who use mass transit, muscle transit, and. So the idea, I know of at least one Burlington planning board. Is outraged having to provide parking spaces since refers to rentals only to bicyclists.
If that's all you need.
Yeah.
Our shit.
it's not your brother, is it? No.
Yes. How perceptive.
All right, section 16.
I just forget.
I know we just had a little chuckle here, but in fact, I think he has a point.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm mostly laughing because I was trying to make a joke, but that's
Oh.
funnier. Okay, so section 16 is on a slightly different topic. So this is about routine adoption of bylaws and bylaw amendments. So a bylaw amendment or a bylaw repeal shall be adopted by a majority of the members of the legislative body at a meeting that is held after the final public hearing and shall be effective 21 days after adoption. So on page 16, it is striking the rest of that sentence, which would allow that currently allows for the legislative body to warn the change for a vote by Australian ballot at a regular or special day. So this is something that some towns have done where they hold all the hearings on bylaws, but then they put it to a vote of the municipality rather than a vote of the legislative body. So this is getting rid of that ability.
So I guess I should ask you why, what the words do. I can, all right. Another question, we were having discussions yesterday about degree to which the public is invited to participate in different processes, so this sounds like removing an opportunity. If you're on a select board, then this is a pretty big policy decision, we shouldn't make it as just a group of 5, 7, 11, whatever. was to have a town vote on it. You could no longer do that, the town decision system is. Seems like an odd power to remove. I could see debate ranking it, but there must be a history here that it's got someone correlated to withdraw it. Thank you.
Alright, on page 16, section 17. Alright, so this is setting more parameters on when municipalities make decisions on permit applications. So, the appropriate municipal panel, when doing a development review decision, so they may recess the proceedings on any application pending. They should close the evidence promptly after all parties have submitted the requested information. The panel shall adjourn the hearing and issue a decision within 180 days after the complete application was submitted, unless both the applicant and the panel agree to waive the deadline. So currently, it is that the panel has to issue a decision within 45 days after adjournment of a hearing. And then it also strikes the language that if they don't issue it within 45 days, then it's deemed approved on the 46th day. So it is striking a reference to deemed approved. But it is setting an overall 6-month deadline on a DRB permit application. Unless both the applicant and the panel agree to an extension.
Okay. There's such different time requirements that surprises me, we are jumping around the clock. You know, 45 days seems fairly tight, but to go from 45 to 180, those are five that the agreement was to add that much time.
Well, but I think it's not from the same starting.
Yes.
So it could work out to be similar in time, and this is, we heard testimony, I believe. I think from Ted Brady, that was like, he would prefer, like, the small towns are feeling like 180 days is too tight. And they would prefer the current language of the 45 days, so.
Yeah, so I agree, so there is a different sort of starting line here, because I don't think. I'm not remembering off the top of my head, but I think that the close of the hearing could take multiple meetings currently, which can take multiple months. And it has to be like, I think there is a more vague timeline in this process than, say, in the Act 250 process. Yes, so I'll just stop there, because off the top of my head, I'm trying to remember if there's another date requirement, but I don't think there is. But yes, so instead of, once the application is complete and deemed complete, starts a 6-month time clock. Currently, there isn't a 6-month time clock, it's 45 days with whenever the hearing is closed, which could stretch out for months currently.
But there's like a lot of starting lines. You can recess proceedings.
Yeah.
Then you can close the evidence.
Yeah.
Then you can adjourn the hearing, and then you can deem an application complete. So. I'm not sure I know how all those marks along the sort of progress of an application sit. So I can.
So being complete is always the first. Right,
Yeah,
an application is submitted, and then the first thing you need to know whether or not it's complete or not. And sometimes people submit things and they're not complete, so there's a little bit of time there, but once it's deemed complete, a completed application. From there has to be a decision on it within 6 months. And currently, that is not how it happens. It might happen within 6 months, but it might not, it might also stretch for quite a while.
even with a complete application.
Yes.
Is telling an applicant that their application is complete a formal step that happens and all these.
I don't remember off the top of my head, honestly, I haven't looked at
I
them
mean,
in
I
a while.
don't trying to know what happens to you when you go through it. I would think that would be an important thing for him to tell you. Now your application is complete.
I think the clock start running when the applications.
Yeah. Well. In this language. Currently there isn't, I don't think, a clock in the same way. For municipal, I cannot speak actually more in depth on this right now, because I genuinely don't remember.
Okay,
I wrote this months ago and I haven't talked about zoning in. More than a month, so I can get you a more complete timeline, but I think it is probably fair to say that it is more vague. As opposed to in the Act 250 process, there is, I think, a few more timelines imposed. But municipalities, I think, have a bit more flexibility on how they schedule things. Particularly because I think they have to be able to have a forum, and hold a meeting, and so. Currently in the statute though, from here, I don't know, I don't remember if there are some, I should have stopped, can we move on? I'm gonna get myself into trouble. Probably if I second further.
Moving past the-
Well, they don't do zoning.
Oh, yeah, who would be the appropriate resource to ask about the timeline of these things?
Secretary of State.
I mean, you could ask the department or maybe the planners.
and maybe Mr. Brady on behalf of municipalities. Okay, so I'm putting a flag to understand the timelines better.
I'd love to see like a visual, because sometimes when we say things in this committee, we just get an email of that information, if it exists. That email would be so
I
helpful.
mean, kind of like putting out a prayer to the universe.
Yeah, like.
Someone may have this timeline.
Someone might have,
Yeah, I have seen things arrived at.
because if we're gonna change it, I'd like to know what it is originally.
Well, that's a little bit like, I don't know, I know you've had. A lot of work going on related to other bills, And we talked a while ago about the possibility of making a chart. We got from the universe, we did get some information. Prior to Act 47, what's proposed in 311. Is that something you've been able to work on or not yet?
No, I don't know if you saw the House calendar this week.
That's,
256.
I'm couching my question in terms
But I
of recognize we have other things.
More
going
than a dozen amendments on Monday.
Yeah.
So no, I haven't done it yet, but also I thought I heard the Commissioner of Housing office offer to do it.
We got something,
Okay,
say. I would like, maybe we use that as a starting point, but I'd like to work with you to have our own version.
okay.
Okay, great, so all of you here, the anything start from scratch, let's start with what came over, thank you.
On to page 17, section 18 is a fun one. So, and I think you may have looked at this last year. Well, it's just a fun conversation for me to have, because there's some fun math here. So I'm in section 18. So currently, there is a list of people who are allowed to appeal municipal zoning decisions. And last year you considered a couple ways to change this. So currently, the list of people who can appeal, people who are an interested person, are a person owning title to property or a municipality or solid waste management district empowered to condemn it or an interest in it, affected by a bylaw, who alleges that the bylaw imposes on the property unreasonable or inappropriate restrictions, or affects the potentially future use, a municipality that adjoins the municipality, a person owning or occupying property in the immediate neighborhood of a property that is subject to any decision or action taken under this chapter, who can demonstrate a physical or environmental impact on the person's interest under the criteria reviewed, and any department and administrative subdivision of the state owning property or any interest in property, and the Agency of Commerce and Community Development. And then there's this category that exists that it's currently any 10 persons who are any combination of voters, residents, or real property owners in the municipality. So this would change that to a minimum of 3%, rounded up to the nearest whole person of the most recent US Census Bureau population estimate that may or may not have participated in the proceeding, or any 25 persons who are any combination of voters, residents, or real property owners.
So if you're in a big enough town. 10,000 people, you don't need 300 to make this petition, 25 will suffice.
Yeah, and so currently, the any 10 people have to, under the any 10 people standard, those people have to have participated in the public process leading up to this. So. Yeah. So.
Okay,
With the most,
I still need the end of the sentence,
Sorry.
but what, I mean,
we're talking about appeals, so whatever the subject of the appeal is, they have to have participated in the hearing on the bylaw or appeal. Oh, so that's 10 people, that's currently what's in statute. This is going to either 25 people who have participated in the hearing. Or 3% of the population, and they don't need to have participated in the hearing, and so. Yep, that is so. Because. Well, I'll stop there.
I remember this was a big conversation last time.
it was.
You want to remind me, committee a little bit about like what you saw going on and maybe some particular areas you.
Yes, well, so I'm gonna speak from the theoretical
Okay.
level. Which I just wanna remind us that like when you say any 10 people, maybe a combination of voters within the municipality. So that's someone who might live across town and maybe just doesn't like they don't necessarily like the project, but there's 10 of them, right? And so my reason I raised my hand actually was because I think that it needs to be clarified, whichever is more, whichever is less, because.
Well, see, this is why it's a fun section, because I think this is a complicated decision, and economic development spent a long time on this section. Because, so 3%, our smallest town has 64 people in it. And our largest town has 45,000 people in it.
Okay.
So, is it the smaller or the larger of those numbers?
Yeah, that's the question. I think it is ambiguous as it is.
No, well, no, so right now it is a choice, because Senate Economic Development really struggled with if they should set the smaller or the larger of
Oh,
those
really?
numbers.
And they
Yes.
decided to not set it.
Well, yeah, so if we're talking about the town of Victory that has 64 people, 25 people
It's a lot.
is a lot.
That's a huge percentage.
What 3% is 2 people.
1.8 people.
Yes.
It's turned into 2 people.
So,
Wow. So like anybody, pretty much. Any 2 people could object. Okay. That's very interesting. I'm gonna chew on that.
we played with a couple different percentages too. We talked about 10%, 5%.
And just so you know how just so the committee knows how I am thinking about this right now. I mean, I have had, I would say bad experiences with appeals. But I feel like I need to keep in my head that there could be projects that I don't like. Like. I think of, when somebody might wanna come in and bottle water or something.
Yeah.
Steal our water, right? Like I'm not into that. So I need to hold on to, there might be.
then you could have a valid objection, even
I
if you
could
were
have a
kind of butter, or you might live across town, but you still feel like that's important.
But and just to throw in another factor here, I wanna observe that in places with zoning, there are actually 3 occasions in which the public can appeal. Including, which I have now, I feel like I have learned, right, that you can appeal the zoning, or that's nice, right, you can appeal the local permits. You can appeal any of the state permits, which is actually a whole litany of permits that you could appeal if you wanted to. And you could appeal the Act 250. That to me feels like 3 bites or more at the apple for an appeal process. I have to speculate as to whether that is,
And you could appeal the original
Sure.
zoning
oh, sure.
bylaw.
I have to, so the appeals here, I'm, just so you know, this is not the time.
I'm gonna say they could, emphasis on the could.
Yeah,
Because they actually may not qualify for all of the appeals processes.
fair, okay, thank you, that's helpful. Just thinking out loud.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna keep chewing on all of this.
Well, I mean, it's not picking on what you're saying, because I get it.
Yeah.
Some people, it sounds like way too much exposure. And other people might say, but these are all unfolding in different times and places, and it's not until you see a particular project being proposed for a place that you know really what those bylaws that you passed 7 years prior could have allowed for, and you go, oh, now that I see a project, I think, and what that implied was allowed. Now I say, no, I would never, now that I see this, I would never agree to the prior bylaw. So I get how people legitimately, from a non-obstructive point of view, could just say, I'm learning more, and it's changed my mind. I also could see how people say, wait, I never know I'm safe on my application until I have everything. Well, 30, after the last deadline for appeal has gone by, on the last permit issued.
I guess I'll say it's quite, as a process, it's quite clunky.
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 Yeah, so the only other dimension, I already sort of mentioned this, is that currently those people have to have had participated in the hearing. So when they were considering 10% of the population and having them participate in a hearing, talking about a potentially 4,000 people showing up to a public hearing on an issue. So that's why they sort of landed where they did.
Thank you.
All right, so on page 8.
And I was to ask one quick question.
Yeah.
So appeals of decisions of the administrative officer, that's, so those are we? Who are we thinking about when we say administrative officer, a DRB? Someone issuing on behalf of the DRB?
Yeah, so I'll just tell you that this part of title of chapter 117 is one of my least favorite parts because it is spread across like 3 or 4 different sections. So yes, we're starting here with the administrative officer, who's usually the zoning administrator or whoever that has been designated as the sort of first line review of applications. But then this defined phrase, interested person, is then used as the operative who is allowed to appeal any decisions from there. So from the zoning administrator's decision, from the DRB's decision. Also on bylaw adoption. And who has the ability to appeal to the environmental court. So it is sort of ubiquitous for all appeals in this chapter, but it's not organized quickly.
Okay, thank you.
So on page 18, there's some additional information related to appeals or provisions related to appeals. So subsection D. For purposes of this section, an appeal shall not include the following, so this is limiting the types of appeals. And any residential and mixed use development containing up to 25 dwelling units within areas served by municipal sewer and water infrastructure. Any permitted residential and mixed use development that does not require conditional use review. Development requiring conditional use review may be appealed. Any housing or mixed use development located within a designated center in a zoning district that allows residential development. So this is restricting what residential development can be appealed.
And the things that can be appealed, these are PRV decisions, and zoning administrator decisions, yeah.
So, section 19. Section 19,
Okay, sorry,
oh yeah,
processing, the. One says bake up to 25 dwelling units. With municipal sewer and water. Two. That does not require conditional use. Review. So as long as you're in compliance with. I just want to make sure I know what triggers a conditional use review. That's usually when you look for a variance from. Something like a setback requirement.
it might, but the towns have the ability to define it in zoning what they require conditional use review for. So I think it really does vary town to town. I think typically, single family dwelling units don't usually go through conditional use review unless they're in a sort of a specific zoning district, but I think there's variety generally.
Not that I would ask you to be pitching, explaining, arguing for this. Are you aware from drafting through what situation was trying to be cured, for instance? Was there a concern that conditional use reviews were being used as a destructive tool for the creation of housing?
So conditional use review may be appealed.
Okay, so it's just based.
So that can still be appealed.
Yeah.
Because I think the town has already affirmatively decided that that type of project does require more review than a permitted project,
Okay.
permitted project. But how all, how all the three of these things line up together? I don't know.
It feels like, there's a story behind, I'm guessing, story or stories behind pretty much all these things, like.
I guess I would just speculate. That in general, the intent is to limit people's ability to appeal housing projects.
Yeah. That's it. Might be a lot of it.
Boil it down.
Did it come from any particular organization or?
Yeah, I came from the department. Most of this came from the department. So section 19 is back to the number of people issue. It's what I already sort of talked about. Participation is required. So an interested person who has participated in a regulatory proceeding may appeal the decision to the environmental division, except pursuant to the language I read you on the prior page, that not every person of the 3% of the population needs to have participated. So that is.
Contradiction.
Isn't that a contradiction?
Yeah, but that's what I was trying to explain. I'm trying to explain that though. So currently under the statute, everyone is required to participate in order to appeal. But if you set the amount at 3% of the population, that potentially is 1,200 people. So this is saying not every person that 3% have to have participated. So that's why that language is being built in there, because of this issue of in Burlington, is it 1,200 people is 3%. So that's still a lot of people to go to a town hearing.
Mr. Church,
Can we?
when you say participate,
If you have provided written or oral comments,
so if you attended a meeting, it doesn't count?
you know, you have to have provided written or oral or written testimony concerning the proceeding.
Oh, so if I went to the meeting but didn't say anything, I still wouldn't count.
I don't think so, but I suspect there's probably some case law on this. But that's what it says on the next page, is that it consists of authoring through oral or written testimony. Statement of concern.
Mr. Chair, I would flag that I do think if we could, that's just one place that I would like us to have a conversation at some point, because you might attend a meeting, but not necessarily have a perspective just yet, but you've followed and want to be involved, but you don't wanna say one way or the other in public how you feel about something. But you might be participating. I don't think that is I feel like that's too exclusive of a definition of participating. I know many people who attend religiously select board meetings and don't say much, but their faces say a lot. So I would just hope that they would be allowed to participate or be considered amongst that group.
Sure. I mean, I'm wondering if this is just so there's a bright line for judging whether someone was a quote unquote participant prior, because then they could go to the record.
Yeah.
See your testimony, you know, and otherwise someone could say I was there.
Well,
If you were.
we have people who, you have to sign in every meeting, like we have a sign-in sheet. And all of those, so if they don't have a sign, I guess.
Yeah.
That's one issue, but
Right, so in a way, you're saying attendance
yeah, I would hope that.
might be equated with participation. As opposed to having submitted forward.
Yeah, especially if these are very difficult or controversial things, you as a neighbor may not yet have a perspective as you're following along. Until you might get to the point where, oh, it is time to really consider an appeal. It's like, no, I've been tracking it, I just didn't want to publicly share a perspective because you don't necessarily know the way that that could be interpreted by your neighbors.
Sure. Yeah, people can be a little uneasy about challenging what a neighbor is trying to do.
Yeah, I am a person who will speak up early and often, but I'm sometimes the rare person at a meeting who will do that. So I would hate to lose out on people who have genuine concern but aren't necessarily in a position to stake a claim yet on that position until they're needed. So that's just one point. And I don't know if there's another definition of participation or something that we have in statute somewhere, but like attendance.
Do you know how long-standing this whatever bright line test is? Something settled long ago. No, it is whatever.
So. Potentially since 1999, potentially, so. At least since 1999.
Okay.
Thank you.
Possibly earlier. Do you want me to stop?
Oh, because we made a guess. Let's get going until the guests arrive, thank you.
Okay. So section 5 is a directive to the environmental division. So the language is on page 20. It shall be the goal of the environmental division to hear a case regarding appeals of an appropriate municipal panel under 24 VSA chapter 117 within 60 days following the case being filed with the division and issue a decision within 90 days following the close of the hearing of the case.
And you're reading from written.
I'm on page 20. So So the language on page 19, none of it's being
Oh.
changed.
Yeah, sorry.
So, and this really, I just wedged it in here because it doesn't fit anywhere else to have goals for the environmental division's operation. So it's, none of the other language in this section is directly relevant. Yeah,
Do you happen to know how these dates compare to the real world experience?
They're in another committee and just a few minutes late.
I don't know what the average time is currently for municipal permits, but I think that the court has the data on that they could bring you. I heard yesterday on the House floor that the court average time for an Act 250 permit is somewhere north of 400 days. So,
Judge Delnay, the right person to?
yeah.
Right, okay.
So, yes, I I advised the Senate Economic Development Committee that, imposing decision requirement timelines on the judiciary is potentially unconstitutional as a separation of powers issue, and so that's why this is phrased as a goal.
I see. I'm wondering about if we get to tell them what their time on. Sandbox?
Thank you, I know we've not talked about 687, but. My understanding is that that like the appeals for Act 250, or that would be heard by. Somebody. Else. No? Okay, and so if we were to go with that language with a different appeals process, this would not be relevant?
Well, no, this is specific to municipal appeals.
Oh, municipal, okay, I'm sorry, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I don't know if Judge Donay actually submitted he has the numbers on how many appeals. They hear a year on municipal, I don't remember, I don't know if he formally submitted or if he just talked, so you can ask him though, because he did look up some of the information for the other committee.
Any other items? Onward. You're right.
Mr. Chair, I'm wondering, is there anything in these sections in perhaps system the location to do it? And I don't know if we can, based on your comments about constitutionality, but. It seems like one of the concerns I've heard with timeliness is just lack of people who are able to process. The appeals, like there's just not like a person available, you know, the backlog is because of capacity and staffing. Is there anything within these sections that resolves that?
What a great transition to the next section. So section 21 is adding a new judge.
Woo!
So, this is adding one permanent judge to the Superior Court. It's not specific to the Environmental Division,
Okay,
but it is just to the Superior Court. And there's $168,000 appropriation for that. I believe the House budget does have 3 judges being added to the Superior Court. So
Where in the house is this? Sorry, 3D to Superior added.
in the budget.
Oh, in the budget. Okay.
Yeah. So this, I think, is sort of an acknowledgement of what we were just saying from the Senate committee, but adding judges is kind of a big topic. So,
Okay, was there discussion or be more specific that it needed to be a judge tasked with hearing, you know, municipal and Act 250 appeals? As opposed to,
so you do, I think you would want to hear from Judge Donay on this. I think I remember his testimony being that they would prefer as much flexibility as possible to structure their own dockets. And that's why it is just vague.
And.
Senator Watson.
Oh, I guess I would just say, I wonder, again, if we can tell them this. Judge should be dedicated to. Sort of, I feel like we heard that in some other testimony in DevOps, that they started to divide things up. Amongst themselves.
yes.
Okay, well, and regardless, we want to have timely hearings on anything appealed to them, so.
Yeah.
Good to have a sense of what portion of it, what the demand is that's coming out of these different funnels, right?
Yeah, I think you should hear from them on that because currently there are two judges that are specific to the environmental division. But I think, and this I could be wrong, but I think the testimony was that the environmental division does not have the biggest backlog. So there would be potentially interest in making sure there's flexibility so that, yes, you could expedite the environmental permits, but also there are lots of other cases that are experiencing the backlog.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I do think it would be beneficial to hear from the judiciary.
Okay, great, thank you. So let's pause, that good place to pause, Dan. Madam Sergeant at Arms, do you wanna lead us through what you would like to do?
You mind if Chief Polway joins me and Kevin Williams
Sure.
will have some comments, so
One, you can pull up 3 chairs.
is that okay?
You're getting all the chairs.
And I apologize for being late.
You guys were in another committee.
Did it work okay? Okay.
You want those chairs?
You're okay.
It's a nice chair. Nicest chair that we've made.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to Tenant Natural Resources and Energy. We don't usually have to distinguish the there's all at one, but 3 at a time.
Yes, sorry, we are a pack, a 3-pack. Actually, Jan's usually with us, a 4-pack, so for the record, I'm Aggie McKessler, Sergeant at Arms, so thank you for having us. And we were hoping to talk briefly about the transition of the Sergeant at Arms office, introduce you to Chief Polway, the new Chief of Police, and Kevin Williams, the interim director. His last day is tomorrow, so give him an opportunity to say goodbye. And what I'm noticing in some of these meetings is that it's also the first time some people are meeting Kevin. So he's done a lot of work in the 6 months that he's been here. And some of it invisible, but all of it very important for the security of the building. Would it be okay if we started with introductions of the members as well, so that John has a chance to hear about you and where you're from?
We'll start over.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Senator Rebecca White, and I'm one of the Windsor County Senate District.
Senator Mark McDonald, Orange County, very rural.
Chris Bray, the Addison Senate District.
Ann Watson from Washington District.
Dick Cormack, I represent Windsor District.
The junior.
Thank you. So the transition is going well. I'm on, I think, the 4th week, and the first week was really nice because it was town meeting break. So Janet and I got to be in the office together, the 2 of us, and review some things, transfer of knowledge, and the way the training is going, and I'm so grateful for Janet, is I basically observe how she does the job and take the lead when it's appropriate, but she's always there to kind of like give me the institutional knowledge or to know where the bodies are buried, so to speak, because I have not yet come across a first time issue. Most of the issues are something that have already been addressed once before in the past. Someone's in my parking spot, or there's an animal in the building. Is it a service animal? Is it not a service animal? Is exactly, so these are.
Is it a senator?
Right, is it right, yes. So, and the issues are the smallest thing in terms of, is there proper supplies in the bathroom, all the way up to the very biggest thing. That's where I'll introduce John, as the new chief of police. So our job as Sergeant at Arms office is to make sure that everybody is comfortable and informed and safe, whether it's members or staff in other state agencies who are just as much staff in the building. I think sometimes they're here all the time. They know the building, and then there's visitors. There's people who come here for the very first time. They'll be here once and they'll never come back again. And if there was an event and that one time that they're here visiting, they would need to know how to respond to that. So finding the right chief of police was a project, and the project that Kevin Williams headed up. Kevin's been here for 6 months. He's the interim between Chief Romei and Chief Polway, and has done a fantastic job of helping to reshape the department and get ready for this new iteration. So Kevin, do you mind if I turn over to you, just kind of talk about that a little?
I just have a few brief comments and that I want to thank each of you and all of your colleagues on both sides for the warm welcome that I've received and the interaction and that I have. It's been a privilege to me, an honor to serve here. And I did what I could in the 6 months that I had. But if you think like a track meet and a need to pass the baton to the next person, I believe we found the right person to pass the baton to. This is a man who served 13 years as a chief of police. In my profession, that is unheard of. Think about where you live, wherever that is. If you have a chief of police, you know your chief didn't last that long. It is just unheard of. The longest I've ever served the chief for 4 years, he did a triple that plus. So when I saw his resume, when I saw his body of work, when I saw his education experience, I'm like, ooh, I like this guy. And then when I got to meet him and talk to him and hear him, I said, this is a man I can feel confident passing the baton to. Is there more work to be done here? Absolutely, yes. But his vision of God aligns with what I believe we should be on here. And so, again, I just want to say thank you. Serving here is not for everybody. It's got to be a good fit. I believe we have a good fit now in Chief John Foley. John?
Thank you, Kevin. So as stated, my name is John Foley, and I'm the new chief of police. So I will try to be succinct in my comments, so we allow for a few minutes for questions or certainly to engage in some conversation. So just briefly, domestically, I'm married 28 years. I have 3 children. My oldest Luke is 24. My daughter Abigail is 22. And my youngest son John is 18. He's studying at Rensselaer right now. Okay. So just to give you a brief educational and professional overview of myself. I first became or aspired to be a police officer and in law enforcement at an early age. My father was a Marine Corps veteran and a 30-year member of the New York City Police Department. So in my household, we were always taught service above self and to be part of the solution to serve our communities. So I felt that law enforcement was a wonderful vehicle to do that. It would allow me to engage the public in a meaningful way, to help people and to serve. So upon graduating from high school, I went to Long Island University, where I attained a bachelor's degree in criminal justice. From there, I entered into the New York City Police Department, and I served for a couple of years there, and it was primarily in community policing initiatives. Towards the end, I was a midnight patrol officer, Upper West Side of Manhattan. Then I had the opportunity to go to Westchester County in the village of Larchmont, and I served there for approximately 27.5 years. And I served in many capacities, first as a police officer, as a detective and a youth officer, as a sergeant, a lieutenant, and ultimately chief of police, where I served in that role for about 13.5 years. During my time as chief, I was also the emergency response coordinator for the village. So I was responsible for the reaction of our emergency services as it pertained to any natural or man-made emergency or disaster. That taught me the value of working with our external stakeholders. And we were a 28 sworn police police department. And for that part of New York, that's considered a smaller job. So when we had a true emergency and things went sideways, we needed to rely on others to help us out. So we quickly began to form meaningful relationships with our external stakeholders, the towns and villages around me, certainly with the county police force and then state and even federal on certain occasions. And really, I think during that time, I understood how difficult policing was. And I still believe that it's one of the, law enforcement is one of the most difficult professions in the country. And part of the reason is that there are legislative changes that continually take place on how we continue our operations, our use of force, what we can and can't do. Certainly societal expectations that change based on events that can happen nationally that affect local departments. And really technology just continues to be developed and created, and it's outpacing everything, and to stay on top of all of those things while delivering public safety is a difficult task. So hiring, recruiting, and then training the people and educating them throughout their tenure is really of paramount concern. But to that end, in 2005, I returned back to school. I went to Marist College in New York, and I attained a master's degree in public administration. And that was certainly helpful as I became chief. As I started, it became more administrative, my role. I started dealing with budgets and personnel issues and leadership and all these different components in the master's in public administration was meaningful. Then in 2016, I had the ability to attend the FBI National Academy in Quantico, Virginia. And for those who are unaware, I lived in Quantico, Virginia for 10 weeks. It's an intensive program. Quantico is essentially a very big Marine Corps base, and housed on the grounds are the DEA Academy, the FBI Academy, and other federal authorities. And certainly it highlighted my career, and I took away 3 components from that I continue to apply in my life. The first, I think, was the wellness of not only myself, but caring for the people that work for you. So it starts with you. You have to be mentally and physically well. And then to ensure that the people that work for you have the resources to be the same way. So to make sure that you're addressing issues, that they're getting their time off, if they need counseling for anything that they have, it's available to them. In this way, if they are well, they can serve their communities appropriately. Then it was professional standards and using the best standards and practices that are available at any given time. And the significance of that, it holds you accountable as a law enforcement agency. Law enforcement has great powers, and with that comes a great responsibility. So making sure that you're using best practices and the standards is important. Before my retirement, we were moving towards accreditation, and that's really the standard that you want for your department. And I would look to incorporate those things certainly here at the Capitol Police Department. And the last was networking. My class, we had 48 states represented, 15 or 16 countries, and we spent a lot of time together in our physical routines, for exercise or academics and socially. And one of the things I expressed to everybody is that even though we were from different areas of the country or from different cultures in terms of our international students, there were many problems in law enforcement that were universal. And really, it's just about our approach to solving those things. So I think that's very important in terms of looking at our police department here. We've just promoted 2 of the officers, Sergeant Massera and Sergeant Truhan, Chris and Sarah, and they are very capable and dedicated officers. They serve this community extremely well. We had a ceremony yesterday to recognize them, and I think it was a wonderful experience. They had family here, and something they don't forget. But it's a public acknowledgement of the good work they're doing. I let them know that they are now part of the building blocks of this department moving forward, so that as we backfill positions and we're able to hire more people, because we're down several positions, the individuals that come here will only know the reality that we present to them. So we want to be a professional, educated, and highly trained department, and that will allow us to serve all of you in a meaningful way. So that's a brief history of my educational and professional experience. Now, just in terms, I briefly like to speak about security and safety in the building. The very first thing, on Monday, Kevin and Janet took me through a tour of the entire building, and I'm still discovering spaces from Kevin and others. But my first initial reaction was concern. This building is very porous. There is no screening process whatsoever. And I do understand I'm a history enthusiast. I appreciate history, I study, I read books about it, I visit sites. And that this place is unique. It's the people's house. And it's probably the purest form of that. And it was probably what the founding fathers had envisioned, that the people were in control, that they had access to their elected officials and the physical building itself. But we cannot deny the realities that exist in 2024. There are bad actors out there and state houses across the country, and not even on a federal level that it has its own issues, but statistically, local and state officials are the ones that are receiving threats, that are physically attacked. This can be a target-rich environment for a bad actor. So we had Sergeant Truhan call every state house in the country, and I'm continuing to assess that information, but it appears this may be the only one that has no screening process whatsoever. And in terms of safety and security, you don't want to be last in this game. So what I'm going to do, and I understand there are individuals here that I've spoken to, and they've certainly sought me out to say they do not want to change. They do not want enhanced security measures. But as chief of police, I will absolutely push for it. I believe in order to be successful, I have to do it incrementally. I said you can't go from 0 to 100 without expecting a lot of pushback, and that's not a wise way to do things. So we'll start small. First, maybe redirecting how people come into the building. I would say we could have elected officials and staff come through one entrance and everyone else come through another. Now we're separating those two groups. And then people that are visiting here and the groups that come here are funneling through a central location where we can simply post officers and they can observe behavior. They can use their senses to look, to see what people are carrying, how they are acting. Is there a reason for concern? Should we pull someone out of the line to engage them in conversation? I think ultimately we need to have a magnetometer here to screen for prohibited items. I've been telling everyone, one of the part-time officers here, he works at the judiciary. He is in charge of the magnetometer program for every courthouse in Vermont. You want to talk about a wonderful local resource. He's responsible for security at all the courthouses. So we talked for about a half hour. I'm going to engage him in further conversation, but he offered to come and give demonstrations of the new technology with the magnetometers, how to do it. He could train all of us, but for the legislators to maybe change some hearts and minds, to understand that we can refine it to the point where we're only looking for handguns or IEDs, things of that nature. So I think it needs to start as soon as possible, and then it needs to progress over time. And again, we can't deny kind of the realities that exist here today. So right now, I'm just assessing operations. It's kind of overload when you first start. And I'm going to establish priorities as we move forward. What are some of the things that we can, the low-hanging fruit that we can achieve immediately? And then what are our short, medium, and long-term goals? And then how do we create a path to achieve them? And that's what my focus will be. So thank you all for allowing me the opportunity to speak. If there's anything I can do myself or my department to serve you, because that's one other thing, if I may, the word service kicked it in again. So we are here to serve, and it's a service and educational role. So during my tenure, we will engage committees to educate you on evacuation practices. If there's a fire drill, if there's an active shooter, if there's a medical emergency, how are we responding to this appropriately to keep not only ourselves safe, but others? But public safety is an institutional responsibility. We have a finite limited of resources in the Capitol Police Department of physical police officers, and we cannot be everywhere. So I want to pass that along to everyone. I want everybody to be part of the solution. All of you should be maintaining situational awareness. So now when I'm in a room, could you go to different rooms? Where's the closest egress? If there was an emergency, how would I get out of here safely? How could I help others? If I'm on second or third floor, that may have an impact. If there's an active shooter, if we know that there are things going sideways in the building, or there are pieces of furniture that can be moved to block the entrance. All of these things you should, even if it's just quietly thinking about myself, okay, I'm here, where's my closest egress? I can get out a window, I can go to the door, anything like that. Kevin and Janet have begun the process of instituting RAID. There's actually a meeting with Sergeant Truhan and others with IT at 11 today. I think we have a committee meeting, but I'll try to get there after. RAID it's used on college campuses and universities. It's essentially a mass notification system so that everybody would have it on their phone. So if something is happening in one part of the building, you can become aware of it and then take proper action again to keep yourself and others safe. So it's going to be a lot and it's going to take time, but I'm absolutely encouraged and humbled by how gracious everybody has been in all the support that I've seen thus far. So again, thank you. And I'd be happy to answer any questions or concerns that anybody has.
Sarah, wait, Sarah, why don't you- This is the Vermont stop sign thing. Who can go first? Here we go.
Sure.
Alphabetical.
Thank you. Well, so I'm just so grateful to have this conversation and just speaking as a high school teacher in my other job who's been through a lot of Alice plans and has to do mandatory, active shooter drills on a regular basis in that other role. And the building is locked and you have to get permission to get in, like, thank you. I know maybe you're getting some pushback, not from me. I'm very grateful that you're going in this direction. And so I just wanted to say thank you for that. And also I noticed a number of Montpelier PD officers at the event yesterday. And so I'm wondering if you could just speak a little bit to how you might envision either working together with the Montpelier Police Department or and just what that looks like to do.
So that's a wonderful observation, and it goes back to what I discussed earlier about forming significant relationships with external stakeholders. So I've already had the ability, I'm already receiving Vermont intelligence reports through the Intelligence Center. I've already been on a Teams meeting with the Vermont Association of Chiefs of Police. On Monday, Kevin, Janet, and Agatha were able to set up a kind of meet and greet with chiefs and sheriffs throughout the state. We had lunch upstairs in the cafeteria. It was just kind of an informal thing. You were able to sit with people and talk and find out where they're from and what they're doing, areas of mutual concern. So Chief Nordenson is absolutely going to be a key player. There are several that I have to meet and talk with. And so his ability to come yesterday, because he knows both Sarah and Chris. Chris was a sergeant there for many years. So it was wonderful that they came to recognize his promotion and be part of it. I had the ability, as did Agatha, to talk to Chief and even just discussing the eclipse that is going to be occurring. And then what his action plans were, and I'm going to be meeting with him and one of the sheriffs to discuss what roads, what closures will take place, what are some of the contingency plans that are set. But we are a very small department based on the population of the community here. We need to establish those relationships immediately. I need to have a strong professional relationship with all of them. All of them, fire, EMS, police, all of them are an integral part of the proper emergency response. But he is our closest ally, so I'm going to get to know him well.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
You're right.
Thank you, Chair. I'm so excited. This is like goodbye. But thank you for passing the torch so well and for even being here for such a short time, for keeping everything moving forward. I'm really grateful for you taking on this role, and it's nice in a way to have you both kind of coming on at a similar time, because I feel like you can move together. I have a lot of personal concerns about safety in the building, and also as we as elected officials kind of exist in the world. I think I'm one of the people who probably experiences more direct, like threatening behavior, or I would say, targeted, largely because I'm a young woman. And I'm also a part of, I would say, a group of more outspoken people. So I tend to be a bit of like a flame to a lot of moths of people who have concerns about liberal young women, essentially. And that brings me to two questions. One, my relationship previously with the division here has been very productive, where when I've had someone who sent me an email that typically it's not, I am going to kill you, or here is how I'm going to kill you, but I think you should die, is essentially like the tone. Whether that's through social media or email, I will forward that and say, hey, this gentleman, I've never had a woman threaten me in that way, equal access though. But when a man will send me that kind of email or social media message, I forwarded it and said, hey, just headlight, like this person, if they happen to be in the building, they don't seem to really want me to exist on Earth anymore, so maybe they shouldn't interact with me. Or you should know if they're going to be interacting with me. And usually they're not exclusively targeting me, usually they have a nice little group of people that they've chosen. So I'm wondering if that's still a good dynamic, if we are getting threats, and typically people know that if they say I'm going to kill you, here's how, that's a difference between I think you should die or you should no longer, people kind of play with it just enough so that they're not technically threatening you, but they are, I consider it threatening. So is that still the right way to do things? Should we be forwarding those kinds of things?
It is,
Like when you shared it with like local PD?
and it really all depends. So already, I've been, as part of the group that it goes to,
Yeah.
I've been receiving emails as well. There was one recently, that may have, and I don't even know that it was insulting. It was a statement, by a gentleman, from a long time ago who was, one of the leaders of the Communist Party in Italy. And simply they sent a flyer to one of the representatives, and she didn't like it and she voted to us. So, I responded that this is the group that it may be affiliated with, but it's not a threat.
Okay.
But we appreciate it. Thank you for forwarding it. Continue to do so. If you're not sure, always send it to us.
Okay.
So then the nuances become what's protected free speech.
Yeah.
And what crosses the threshold that now allows it to become a threat. So once it becomes a threat or we perceive there's a danger, then now we can engage local, state authorities, maybe federal authorities, depending
Yeah.
on what's happening. But each case is unique and individual, so we assess it based on that.
Yeah.
Continue to send it to us. And if it's nothing, that's fine, but we would rather have the information because if
Yeah.
we do see a pattern,
Yes.
that may be one of the factors that raises it to another level. And now we can take different types of action as a result of it.
Yeah, I really appreciate that, because I think one of the main things that makes it hard to serve in this role is just feeling like you are endangering your physical safety along with your family's physical safety.
Yes.
And that's not a risk that I take lightly. So thank you, that's a great thing to know that we can still keep that kind of open communication, and I know there are very specific individuals that Chief Romai had been kind of keeping track of for me, but they haven't been very active this year, so I guess that's.
That's good. I'd like to add something to that. Sergeant Sarah has been tasked with being our primary threat assessor.
Nice.
And we keep track of every one of these threats.
Great.
On my estimation, 15 to 20 a week, we receive, and it's not just from the people who have been upset with you. This time in like 2023, 2024, the big election cycle
Yes.
in the United States, and people's belief that they can start acting out without impunity.
Yeah.
Okay, and you all are considering some bills that are of concern to some of your constituents. And so all of these things are playing in at the same time, and I can assure you that we receive every message and every notice. And please, if you have any concerns, please do send them to us. We don't ignore any.
No, you.
Okay.
It's been very.
But you have your concern is legitimate, and our response is very important because we do not ignore that at all.
And then that brings me to my second question, which is we've had members of our body on the House side who have not run for reelection. Who have left office due to the fact that they've had extremely harassing behavior happen to them. And I'm wondering, and they've been women of color. So I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit to, and also anti-Semitism. We've had some very, I would say, directed comments towards people who are Jewish or people think they are Jewish. That could be members of the media as well. I'm wondering how you feel, what your work will be on making sure, particularly people who are in elected office or in the building who are not what we might traditionally have experienced as people holding those positions, how we can make sure that they're not getting directed hate or feeling more uncomfortable than maybe people who have traditionally looked more like those who have served.
So to Kevin's point, the reason we want all the information is because it's important to distinguish trends.
Here.
Or a specific targeting of a group. Now if we see that, we can fall back into our service and educational role as a law enforcement agency. And that means that we can now take this group and supply them with training that may enhance their safety. Personal things that they can do, if they need escorts to cars, anything that we think, depending on the level of the threats that we think will enhance their personal safety and to allow them to continue to do this very important work. So that's why it's important to keep sending the information, because you may send it and not even realize it may be affecting multiple other people, and none of you can connect that dot, but we are the central repository in a sense. So we would have that information. And then once we see those trends, it would be about education, steps that we can take in terms of law enforcement steps, and then just making you aware how to go about your business, what your routine should look like, or changing your routine. And again, escorts, all of those things can come into play, but that's why data is important, information. We can then use that to direct our resources towards a problem. And if it ever reaches a level above First Amendment protected speech, then it becomes a problem. We can take official action based on that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
General Cronin, guys.
Thank you for the service you've given us all.
You're welcome.
Well,
Thank you, sir.
on the same line of people harassing, threatening legislators, I think a lot of us are reluctant to bring things to the attention of security. The chair mentioned Canadians at a four-way stop sign. It was similarly, I think Vermonters often don't want to make a big deal.
Yes.
Okay, and there's a reluctance to bring in. What happened to me in my first year in the Senate, 35 years ago, a guy left a Molotov cocktail at my, he didn't like it, but he left it there with a note saying, "I know how to make a bomb, I know where you live." I knew the guy because he signed his name, and he was angry because a moose had collided with his truck and he thought the state should pay him for that. So.
It never lost.
And I brushed them off. he had bothered me, and I thought he's. And my 17-year-old son said, Dad, I just left a bomb at your door and threatened to kill you. And I went to the police, I was full of apologies. Well, the guy got charged with 5 federal felonies, which he had to plea bargain and say he was sorry, and has not been a problem since, but the sense is that it ought to at least be looked at.
Yeah.
And you know that. I'm not sure all of our colleagues do. There's a certain hesitancy. And just a welcome of saying, maybe it is nothing, we're the cops, let us make that decision.
Yes.
I mean, that's really the thing it is, and that's what my son had said to me, they're the cops, let them decide how they can deal with this.
So your point is well taken, and when we're talking about threats to physical safety and that's even in furtherance of that. Now, the individual has created a functional IED, right? None of that can just be dismissed. It's no time to be polite and say, I don't want to bother the police department. That's gone. One of the things I said earlier, we cannot deny the reality. You can say we're in Vermont, it's always been like this, people's house. We cannot deny the reality that exists today. Certainly post-pandemic, and I think they're going to study this for a long time. The instances of mental health and mental health crises has skyrocketed. I had occasion within the past few months where I flew to Buffalo and I was next to a psychiatrist, and I happened to, he was talking and working on his computer, and it really was about how they were going to address the explosion. There weren't enough mental health professionals, that it doubled and sometimes tripled the response from law enforcement or mental health officials. So this is a problem that exists. People are unstable. And I think with the legalization of drugs in many parts of the country, that creates its own issues because people believe even just marijuana is a benign drug, but they're showing now that it can create psychoses in especially young, teens as their brains are developing. And I'm not going to get into the political discussion about it because that's not my place. Whatever every state decides to pass is their business. I come from New York, they passed it, it's legal. But it is creating a mental health crisis, legalization of some drugs, in my estimation, combined with the lack of resources and access to mental health professionals, and combined with what happened during the pandemic. So now people were isolated, and if there were underlying issues, they were brought to the surface. There's also a lack of accountability in some states to prosecute certain crimes. So I think it emboldens people. And this community here is a target because you are elected officials. That's it. In every state, they are a target on the federal level. And so that's why every time I see someone, they introduce themselves. If there's anything that you need, however small or insignificant you may think it is, come see me, come see one of my officers, call us. I have to spread that word, that gospel out there, because we can't react to something or mitigate a problem if we don't know what the problem is. And data drives a lot of that. So I don't think, don't take anybody's threat lightly. It's all very serious, and we want to be able to help.
I would like to add something, if I may. Most of my law enforcement experience in the past 20 years has been on college campuses. And we have a saying, if you see something, say something. And please continue to spread that here. No matter how minute it may appear to be, we are masters at putting puzzles together in order to identify what the appropriate level of concern should be. And I do not believe, based upon what's going on nationally, that things are getting better over the next few months. That's my personal opinion, based upon almost 50 years in law enforcement. That's my assessment, but our responsibility, mine until tomorrow, is to act as going forward, is to keep you all safe. And the best way to do that is through communication. That's the absolute best way to do it. Drown them in information if need be. They will never complain because that one small piece of information may be what's needed in order to put things together to keep you safe.
Jim McDonald.
Welcome.
Thank you very much.
I shared that one day, school in Manhattan,
Ah,
and it was a long time in New York. Due to redistricting, I've been burned in my district for the first time in my legislative career. With having responsibility for representing a traffic light.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Within a year or two, I'll sit right here. So, if I were in your shoes, I would find it a terrific change of pace and, welcome.
Thank you so much. I do appreciate it.
Can you say, it seems as though in recent you were talking about the mental health crisis we're facing. We talk a lot outside of the buildings about Department of Children and Families, all that kind of stuff, but law enforcement seems like it's having a much more frequent role to play in addressing public health in whatever community it's in. And people used to think about police as just enforcing law as opposed to intervening on mental health things. Can you just say a little bit about how you train for that and how you think about it?
So absolutely, we're trained in de-escalation and you do receive mental health training. But it's limited. And the reality is no police officer, and unless they did it previously, is a social worker. No police officer is necessarily a psychologist or a psychiatrist. So they have many tools, but they have to respond to a myriad of issues that come up. And part of the problem in the trend, and this is generally speaking, because I'm still learning about Vermont and how Vermont does things statistically and their responses to things. So it's all different, right? But generally in law enforcement, the police over the last decade, if not longer, have been tasked with addressing societal problems that should be addressed in other areas. And so we are, because nobody calls the police, generally speaking, when they're having a great day. Nobody calls just to say, I woke up and I'm having a great day, I thought you should know. It never happened, not 30 years that I see. When do they call the police? When something has broken down to the point that they can no longer deal with it, domestically or otherwise, where they are a victim of a crime, or something substantial and impactful has now come into their lives. That's when the police officers call. Everybody loves the fire department because they are there to help people, and I'm a volunteer firefighter, so it's a different relation. They're emergency services, but people approach them differently. Police officers have to enforce laws and tell people no. And they call them when an emergency occurs and their life breaks down on some level. So what I would generally say to that is, I think when I've seen departments move to potentially having mental health professionals respond as the lead, but with law enforcement in tow in case things do go sideways, so now we can keep everybody safe. But sometimes, if you have the resources and the training and you can incorporate that into your policies and procedures, I think that's a way to alleviate some of the negative encounters that occur with people who are in mental distress. And they don't need to necessarily be arrested. But when you only possess certain skill sets and it gets to a certain point, you have to take the action that you need to take. Sure. So I think it's education in terms of sending our officers to training, to making sure they're up to a certain level. It's looking how we respond as a department if we are encountering this. But for the agencies outside, the cities and towns, it's about resources, and do you have the people in your community that you can call in a crisis that can respond? It's about a financial consideration. Now you have to compensate these. It's a multifaceted problem, but as we discussed, as it increases, there needs to be a proper redress of all of this. And I think it's increased mental health funding, resources that are available, community resources within the community that people are aware about, that they know that they can access. It needs to be a holistic approach. You just cannot call the police every time a societal problem breaks down. That's when we have problems.
Yeah, well, I think, I feel like teachers are in the same boat in a way, that schools have become the front line for dealing with many social challenges, including mental health and nutrition.
A great observation. My family is all educators. My wife, my daughter now will be mother-in-law, and that was one of the complaints. They are dealing, when they get them in the classroom, it's not just instruction, but all of these things that go along with it.
Well, I wanted to say, to Chief Williams, thanks for keeping an eye on us all the months, you've been so well. It's always clear that you're at our backs, you're looking out for us, like a guardian angel. And she might go away, that will welcome.
Thank you.
I really look forward to getting to know you better and working with you. Obviously, you already have a lot of fans in the committee already. So
Just really quickly, you're familiar with Team 2 in Montpelier or Vermont? No, okay, so put it on the radar.
Yeah, please.
Team 2, I just found what to say. Team 2 is a mental health crisis scenario-based training for first responders funded by Department of Mental Health, Public Safety. Anyway, so this is, just want to make sure that's on your radar as a source for mental health. It's a collaborative between mental health professionals and police officers.
Well, it is now, so thank you.
Yes, okay, great.
Yes.
Thank you.
now, Corey, over to you.
I want to tell you how sorry I am that you came here in October. In April. It's lovely here in the warm.
So, but first of all, thank you. Secondly, I spent 18 months as the chief at Keene State College in
Oh, nice.
so I'm familiar with all of the seasons. I just very briefly want to say this. I started at LAPD 40 years ago, and I was thrilled to find out that they had a mental evaluation unit, MEU. And they had sworn police officers that were fully trained in engaging people with mental health concerns. And we reduced significantly the force being used by police on people who are mentally ill. It's not a good formula to take police and put them with people who are these people are sick. They need help. And so I agree with everything that John said. But as a state visitor to the state, I'm glad to hear about Team 2. I didn't know about it, but I'm glad to hear about that. That's the right idea. That's the right approach, to have those partnerships. And where they don't have them, we see these disasters nationally occurring. Because calling police when someone is ill is not the right idea.
So, Madam Sergeant at Arms, thank you so much for organizing this visit, setting things up, getting us all on the right foot.
Thank you all.
Thank you for your service. We certainly hope, Chief Williams, that you'll stick around for months even.
I'm real upset.
Have a great day. Nice meeting everybody.
It has to, some fresh and cheese and crow.
Yeah,
Yeah, so,